Good morning, dear students. Today we will continue with our last part of the sampling. In this session, we will talk about sampling errors. In the previous two sessions, you have learned probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Now, the errors involved in the collection of data mainly are of two types. One is sampling error and second one is non-sampling error. Coming to the sampling error. Now, it is a statistical error that occurs when an analyst does not collect a sample that represents the entire population of the data. That means the sample that we are selecting does not represent the population, and the data we are collecting from that sample is not resembling the data of the population. So, the results found in this sample will not represent the results that are obtained from the entire population. So the sample is not exactly representing the population from what it is supposed to be. A sampling error is a deviation in sampled value versus the true population value. That is what I was telling you. Due to the fact the sample is not representative of the population, or it can be biased in some way. These errors arise due to sampling process or due to sample size, which is inadequate. Now, they arise from any bias in selection, that is, when you are not selecting the sample properly, or the sample group whom you have included does not represent properly, or the sample size estimation is not right, or it is insufficient sample size, or sometimes a sample is substituted because you are not able to get that particular item in that sample. So there is a substitution of an item in place of the one which actually you have selected before. In that sample, whomever you are supposed to collect the information, since there is difficulty in that, you have substituted that item with another item. So what happens when you are substituting the item which you have selected, actually the substituted item does not represent the sample. So that becomes bias again. And defective process of selection. The selection is not correct. Improper selection. In any ways, if it becomes non-randomized, or if it becomes judgment, or how you conveniently you select the sample, these things can peep in and that becomes an error in the sample. So when you are not following the probability sampling methodology where you are going to get a true representation of the population, these kind of biases will occur mostly. And incomplete coverage of the units in the sample. If you are not able to get the sample, the units are not available for you and you are not able to collect the information from those people, so the incomplete coverage also can lead to this. So the sampling error can be reduced by randomizing the sample selection, or by increasing the sample size, or increasing the number of observations. So the sampling errors can be eliminated when the sample size is increased, and also by ensuring that sample adequately represents the entire population. So it can be reduced by randomizing the sample selection or increasing the number of observations, and definitely by increasing the sample size. And whichever the sample you are selecting, it should be the true representation of the entire population. With this kind of measures, if you take, these sampling errors can be minimized. So the sampling error can result even when no mistakes of any kind can happen. So the sampling errors can be minimized only because even then also sampling errors can happen. But because what happens, it is not exactly matching or perfectly matching of what you get the observations from the sample to the entire populations, but it should be maximum possible level to the maximum possible extent to the entire population. So the sampling errors can be minimized but entirely cannot be eliminated, but this does not distort your study. Okay, so let us see the next one, that is non-sampling errors. Now these non-sampling errors are more important. I don't say sampling errors are not important. Non-sampling errors are more important because if there is any fault in this, the study might get scraped out. So let us see what are these non-sampling errors. This non-sampling error is a statistical term that refers to an error resulting during data collection, causing that the data to differ from the true values. So that means during the data collection there are certain mistakes that had happened, and this data does not actually give you the true data or true values from the population. So when a non-sampling error occurs, the rate of bias in the study goes up. So that's what I was telling you. Non-sampling errors can distort the study more than sampling errors. Sampling errors can be limited if you increase the sample size and if you take a proper selection representing the data. But whereas in non-sampling errors, that if the data collection is faulty, the whole study is distorted. So there are many ways these non-sampling errors can occur. For example, non-sampling errors can include but not limited to data entry errors, biased survey questions, that is if you have not framed your questions properly and if your question is not intended, is not collecting the information what it is intended to collect, or even there are some biased processing or biased decision making or biased analysis is improper, and if the responses given by the participants is improper, then inappropriate analysis conclusions and false information provided by the respondents. So that becomes information bias or recollection bias, or the respondents are not giving you proper answer whatever the questions you are asking, whether it is willingly or unwillingly or knowingly or unknowingly, they can give you a wrong answers, or if they want to give you a biased answers also it can cause. So this can happen due to coverage errors, observational errors and processing errors. Now coverage errors is due to the non-response or non-cooperation of the informant. As I have told you yesterday, some information might not be given by the participant wholeheartedly, or maybe if he is not willing to give you total information, or if he is hiding some part of the information which is very crucial for the study, that becomes an error. Because if the information what you are requiring for your study purpose, if he is not giving that information, that study becomes useless for us. So that becomes a coverage errors. Now let us see the observational errors. This happens when the interviewer is biased, or imperfect experimental technique, or improper interaction. The observation means the person who is collecting the information is biased. So suppose if he wants to collect information only from particular people or in a particular method, then that information is again becoming biased. So interviewer will not ask certain questions properly, or certain questions he'll ask in a different way from certain people. So the information that is collected does not match with both the people or both the participants, because observer himself is at bias. And the next one is processing error, which is very important because this error happens in improper statistical analysis or improper statistical methods. If you are not if you're not applying a proper statistical technique in analyzing the data to get the information what you are supposed to get, that can become an error. So this is a processing error. These are called sampling and non-sampling errors. With that, we will wind up the errors in sampling. And before closing down this session, I would like to give you some terminologies which are very important, which you will be needing in your further education or even your Viva voice questions also. So let us see the first one, that is population. What is a population? It is an entire group under study as defined by the research objectives, sometimes also called the universe. Now sample, a subset of the population that should represent the entire group. That becomes the sample. See, these are all the questions which in the examiner can ask in Vivas. So sample units, these are all the elementary units or clusters or groups that form based upon the sampling process. The basic level of investigation, that is school children, consumers, storage manager, these are all called as sampling units. That unit can have a group of people. So the research, or even sometimes one person also can become a unit. It depends upon the study design. Now the research objective should define the sample unit. Exactly, that's what I was telling you. So whatever the research objective, based upon that, the research, the sample unit becomes. Now sampling frame. The sampling frame is the total of elements of a survey redefined according to certain specifications. It consists of the sampling units. Now if I say school-based study, that the school becomes your sample frame. If I say village or village background or rural areas, the villages will become the sample frame. Now coming to the sample size, the number of sampling units to be selected becomes your sample size. These are all the questions which can be asked. Coming to the sampling method. Now sampling design. A definite plan for obtaining a sample from a sampling frame is called sampling design. Now sampling methods, we have seen how whichever sample designs, yesterday probability, non-probability, based upon what is the study design, what is the research objective, then the particular sample design can be selected. Now sampling error. So errors that arose on account of sampling, like what we have dealt in today in sampling errors and non-sampling errors. These are all the terminologies which you should be knowing in regard to your Viva. With that, we close the sampling session. Thank you. If you have any doubts, please get back to me in the department. I hope you understand that. Thank you.